Welcome to the weekly write-up. I'm your host, Kelly Elson, coming to you live from the Desk of Shame. It's been a big week of college fantasy football news. Some of you may be surprised to hear I'm doing the write-up as the reigning popular vote champion of last year, and some of you may not be surprised at all.
Rigged!
Our first story tonight is the developing race for the Charleston Cup. For those of you named Harrison, you might not have heard about the Charleston Cup. It's a league with a storied history of over a decade, fueled by passion, public shaming, and sibling-on-sibling crime.
Sibling-on-sibling crime.
It was a sloppy matchup between Kyle's Red Herrings and Samantha's Sacks in the City. Samantha is our reigning champion by electoral commissioner.
Rigged!
And Kyle is a previous champion with a record of consistent, high-scoring games, only to somehow lose against someone that had the game of their life. Apparently not rigged. But ultimately, Kyle took home the dub, and Samantha... With no ulterior motive of my own, let's take a look at this season for Samantha. Samantha's team is what happens when you win the championship and pull a Stetson Bennett. She went from on top of the world to downing White Claws. Without 5 extra points to magically win games, Samantha's had a rough start. But being winless this season is not enough to lose support. And don't worry, Samantha, your supporters aren't going to turn on you over one game time move. Unless your name is Mike and you either coached the Falcons in the Super Bowl or refuse to commit treason, in which case, you might be in a little trouble. Samantha started the season with a write-up, but it's still early in the season, and there's plenty of time to change the tune and stop reminiscing on the past. Now let's reminisce on the past. I'm going to read a text conversation between Samantha and myself during the 2023 Charleston Cup championship game. Samantha said, "I think they pulled my receiver, so I think you won. Congrats, my love." And 2 hours later, she said, "Okay, for some reason they gave/awarded 5 more points after the fact for my receiver, and I don't know why. I love you. I sorry."
Rigged!
The corrupt league commissioner added points to her score after the game ended. It's rigged. This is the proof you've been waiting for. Rise up! Rise up!
Our legal team wants you to know this show is for entertainment purposes only and is not a reliable source of news.
In other fantasy news, Ariane, who has historically been a winner and strong contender, has fallen out of favor. She's been falling from grace despite many efforts people deem attention-seeking and desperate, such as murdering snakes in the Everglades. There's a word for Ariane's experience of suddenly and for no reason being bad, and also perceived by everyone as annoying. She's being womaned. For those of you who haven't heard of this, being womaned is the nebulous but unmistakable cultural event in which mass public opinion on a woman reverses dramatically, universally, and seemingly overnight. Or, in simpler words, when everyone just decides you suck now. It happened to Anne Hathaway in 2012. It happened to Taylor Swift in 2024. And now possibly Moo Dang, the viral sensation Thai pygmy hippo. We have to put an end to this. Moo Dang cannot be womaned. And it can't happen to Ariane. I mean, no one's even talking about her season being pretty good so far. She's in 3rd place in her division. All everyone is talking about is how she's less fun now that she moved away from her favorite cousin. Or how she's not the favorite child because her brother has 2 adorable babies. So she needs to rely on her performance to really rise to the top. Not from sleeping with the commissioner, not from letting her win because we're all scared she can beat the snot out of us, but from her grit and sheer coaching power to break the cycle of getting womaned. And now this.
Moo Dang the pygmy hippo being very cute.
Despite a loss this week, the team to watch is coached by Katie and Blake. Dublin Down is a high-scoring machine, and now that Greg has moved in, we would like to emphasize high. Katie and Blake might have taken an L this week, but they are coping with a fat J. James's cardiac pack lost this week to Ariane, but I'm not going to talk about that because it undermines my story about Ariane getting womaned. Sean did great this week. I'm just now receiving information that his bench did great this week. Kevin put a walloping on Sean, but after heartlessly beating his brother-in-law last week by 1 point, well, we expected no mercy from that asshole. Rich and Etty know a thing or two about babies, so it was easy going up against a baby team coached by either Harrison or Wes. I didn't know when Harrison dropped out. I don't know how these guys have time to be parents to 2 babies, Cam, a puppy, and a winning fantasy football team, but somehow they do. They need to expand their consulting businesses to fantasy because there's some teams they could help out. Which leads us to Wes. For Wes, the good news is that he literally can't be worse than Harrison has been for the past few seasons. The bad news is he's stuck with Harrison's auto-draft picks. I heard Richard and Etty offered team turnaround consults for the meager price of 2 more puppies. We all know why I'm hosting tonight, because Mike Bobo can't run an offense to save his life, and because the league is rigged. But also because Dean beat my team or whatever. Enough about that. Let's take it over to Hannah, our gender-confused, blue-haired liberal correspondent. Hannah, what's got you worked up today?
Hannah's hot take and safe space.
Kelly, I'm not worked up. I'm woked up. I've been hearing a lot of locker room talk that Andrew's injury-prone team hasn't been injury-prone in years. People are spreading misinformation that he uses that as an excuse for being bad at fantasy. I find that offensive because every emotion is valid. Every player is prone to injury. And this divisive rhetoric is extremely invalidating to Andrew's little soft baby feelings. Men can cry, and look, he is. He's crying right now, and he should. He is so brave. Because against all odds, he did it. He overcame his one injured backup running back to deliver his first win of the season. But who knows how many potential players could have been suffering from injury proneness. He's facing a lot of trauma. Even though this one injury can be triggering for him, he's never given up. Andrew shows us year after year that fantasy football is not about winning. It's about having fun.
Thank you, Hannah. Next, we have a freak show that's never had a bad season. Rush surely is cooking those grits as the only undefeated team left in the cup and with the highest point total by a mile. He had a good matchup this week against his own wife, another fearsome fantasy team. I think the real secret to fantasy football is being retired. Go get a job, you bums. The takeaway here is that in 30 years, Harrison is going to be really good at fantasy football. Dixie was hoping to imprison Rush's winning streak, but Rush swallowed the key. He came out unscathed, and after benching his 30-point scoring wide receiver, he kept the peace in the house. Dixie now has a loss on her record and, like me, has learned the hard way that it wasn't a winning gamble to bet on Georgia this week. Especially when your team is 60% Georgia players. Luckily, Kirby squeaking out a win caused a real cooling effect on Dixie's disappointment.
And now, our hot game of the week.
In a highfalutin shootout between Martin and my dad, Martin emerged victorious. They went shot for shot all night, and Dad apparently hasn't learned his lesson about taking shots with Martin. Martin always wins. Well, that's all we have tonight on last week's Top Fantasy Stories. Thank you to our sponsor, Loser by Default Network. Fuck you to Mike Bobo. I'm out to play with our show mascot, Moo Dang. I'm your host, Callie Elson. Good night!